Hi folks, with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about again, all across the white Western countries, and again, the governments are globalist controlled to varying degrees, but globalist controlled nonetheless. There's a real push to promote this idea of non-grading, no testing, no grading. All outcomes are equal in education. All students have equal human worth. And I don't doubt the equal human worth thing, but are they all just as good as each other at mathematics or I don't know, written language or anything like that? So let's have a little look at this idea. Now, before I get on to it, you'll probably note that again, across the Western world, there was a real push in the late 80s or through the 80s and into the 90s to crush all the prominent trade unions in the West. And no matter which trade union you looked at, they were being attacked. And you probably remember in the United States in the time of Ronald Reagan, the air traffic controllers strike. There was the governments all across the Western world are really moving to get quite tough on trade unions, building unions, coal mining unions, air traffic controllers. The list just went on, and there was a real struggle. And the unions were either crushed or they were bought off. The key union people were bribed with nice waterfront properties and that sort of thing. And I was surprised at how casual they were about selling out the workers. It took me by surprise back then. But then today we look at how casually our elected representatives sell us out to the globalists. So I suppose that was the beginning of that process, certainly at an industrial level before it got to political level. But the only union that wasn't crushed throughout the Western world, every union was crushed or bought off. The only union it wasn't was the teachers' union. For some reason, the teachers' unions were left untouched. There was a bit of pushing and shoving at the margins, but everywhere in the Western world, teachers' unions are incredibly powerful, and governments seem to be unwilling to take them on. Now, that's hardly surprising, because in every Western country, the teachers' unions are in full and total support of the globalization project. Mass migration, fantastic. Gay, lesbian, social division, racial division, gender division, sexuality division. The teachers' unions are like super on board with this, and also on board with the equity program. So as more and more kids come into the school system that don't speak English and that are very low quality students, they'll never fucking pass anything. And the more these students are waved through the high school system and into college, then the greater the need, if you're going to have equity, the greater the need to stop all testing, stop all grading, stop all examinations, and just say, look, everybody's equal. Everybody's the same. It's not about education anymore. It's about human worth, and everyone has the same human worth, therefore, or everyone's the same, everyone's got the same outcome. And that's sort of really where it's going. And that's kind of warm and fuzzy. Well, are you against human worth, you fucking Nazi? So you can sort of see the fuzziness of it all, the warm and fuzzy. But this is something that is, it's truly insane. But does it mean that the future is such where we won't need educated people anymore? The enforcers of the globalist ideology only need to be on board with those people are Nazis and they don't deserve legal rights. So very simple people and brutish at that. Are they the people that are going to be needed? We don't need technical geniuses or bright people or hardworking people or people who, because once you get people that have achieved things by their own merit, their own hard work, their own brains, their own ingenuity, they're much harder to control. And that's why white people have to be eradicated. The globalists, as far as the globalists are concerned, the hardworking middle class white people, they want the rule of law. They want the rule of law and due legal process. They want fair and free elections, and that's not the globalist. This is not the globalist ideology. The globalist ideology includes none of those things. It's arbitrary law and rigged elections. And and social, disrupting and destroying all social harmony that they can. If a bunch of Palestinians gather around the flag and go parading up and down the street, they're just demonstrating their right to free speech. But if a group of white people get together and do it, then they're fucking Nazis, they're fucking Hitler. So it's very different standards, and white people just have to go. Now, the same as in education, white people do pretty good in education, and so particularly in white majority countries, so you have to create a scenario or an outcome where everyone's equal. But the real issue is not so much that the poor black students are given the same ranking as the hardworking, industrious, conscientious, high IQ white students. It's not just that, but it's just to very clearly state to white people, your achievements mean nothing. Nothing. You might as well just not bother, because you're going to get the same ranking as the disruptive black kid with an IQ of 80 that does fuck all work and doesn't bother handing in. Now, this is something, if you look at the moves in not just Australia but in the United States, Canada, Britain, and elsewhere, there's a real move to prevent or stop any aspect of school student sort of work or behaviour or interaction with teachers that would cause any sort of grading or any sort of this person achieved it but that person didn't. So any sort of differentiation between the students. So there must be no difference in outcome or grading between the hardworking, bright students and the slow-witted, lazy students. So that the outcomes must be the same. So there's a real move on that. So here's some interesting things. So if there's a school assignment that you've got to hand in, and I want these assignments on, Shakespeare or something, whatever it might be. I want these assignments handed in by Friday. So now the teacher hands in, the students hand in the assignments on Friday, but quite a few of the students don't. The ones that maybe where English isn't their first language, or they come from poorer households, or they're just too stupid, or they don't give a shit, or whatever it might be. That doesn't matter. They're allowed to hand in the assignments whenever they're ready, whenever they want to, even if they don't want to. And if there are groups in Australia, racial groups in Australia, where even if they don't hand it in at all, they still must be graded as the average. So, if the average is 6.5 out of 10 for, the assignments that the people who did hand it in got, then you give the kid that didn't hand in the assignment, never even started or did anything, you give them the 6.5 out of 10 grading as well, because they come from the designated minority group. So this idea of creating equal outcomes. Now, even that they want to do away with now, that say you hand in your assignment, fine, but the assignments won't get graded. So everyone's equal, whether you handed an assignment or didn't, or whether you handed in a rubbish assignment or a good one or a crap assignment, and it doesn't matter. Everyone has to have the same outcome. Now, you can still go through the ritual of handing out the assignments to do, but then after that, it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to get the same outcome. Now, I think that would have the disproportionate effect of students that have the motivation and the commitment to actually do the work, do the assignment, and to do a good job and have their parents involved, where their parents may go, well, you missed out a bit here. Why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? Then that would be something that would work well for those students. So you would get still a proportion of the self-motivated, parents helping, that sort of thing. They would still do the work and would still come out of the other end of the education system with a decent enough education, only because of their personal commitment, not because the teachers were requiring it or because they were receiving prestigious grades or not, or only because they want to. And again, their parents may be involved or the wider family. So this is something that this will be a hidden sort of, this will be if you like, a hidden movement within the education system, where the self-motivated kids will still come through at the other end with a good education, a quality education, and the knowledge that comes from that. Whereas the other students will be able to hide behind the camouflage of equity and not do any work at all, but still get the bit of paper. They still get the degree or the high school diploma, or whatever, even though they can't read or write. Now, I first noticed this in America when I first went there. I was working for a company. We were opening up a couple of offices in America, and one in the Northeast and one in the South around Texas. And given in the Northeast, there was a lot of minority type applicants there. And so I was quite surprised when, I'd interview anybody from the minority groups where they'd be invited in for an interview. I wasn't actually originally going to do the interviews, but the HR department people, they didn't arrive, or their plane got held up or something or other. So I ended up having to do quite a few of those interviews. Not through choice, by the way, but I was quite taken aback by pretty much any minority, even white women, straight white women, but pretty much any minority group, particularly the brown and black groups. They could have multiple degrees, high school diplomas plus multiple degrees from somewhat prestigious colleges and the like, and yet they were functionally illiterate. They seemed, like it just in the conversation, it seemed I was talking to someone who had an IQ of 80 or 70, or they just seemed really thick and dim-witted, and I couldn't work. How could you have 2 degrees? Or how could you have a PhD or a master's? Well, not a PhD, but a master's. How could you have that and be this thick-witted? It's not possible, is it? And this was before Australia had gone down the super woke path. So America was well ahead in the stakes of wokery. So it took me by surprise. I just couldn't get my head around it. Now, I ended up talking to a few people in the sort of the education sector, and the teachers and educators generally, and they were very woke, especially in the Northeast. They were Northeast of the United States. They were very woke, and no, this is equity, and if we do have equal outcomes, then that adds to the person's self-esteem. So that's good that they have high self-esteem, and so they seem to think that somebody who had a piss poor education, if we tell them they're really smart, then they'll have high self-esteem, and this will give them positive reinforcement. But in reality, they're stupid and lazy as fuck. And so I struggled to get they saw it as an exercise in social justice, these teachers and the like, rather than education. And that's probably where it ran off the rails. But I was surprised by this. So again, the days when if you weren't a very good student, the school would invite you to leave. Look, you're not a good student. You don't really want to be here. You're never going to be a good student. You're not putting the work in to make a difference to your education, your outcomes. So why don't you just go and get a job? And this caused a huge exodus of kids, 15-year-old kids, or some kids would maybe just scrape through and getting a junior high school diploma, and then they would leave because a junior high school diploma, back in the days when I was at school, it was still carried some weight. And if you got a senior high school diploma, you were perceived to be quite well educated back in the day, and you could get an extra 10% on your pay. So if the pay was, I don't know, at the time, $50 a week, or it was, 100. I use a round number, 100. They would pay you $110 a week if you had a higher, if you had a senior high school, like college graduation certificate and so on. And quite a few companies offered to pay, almost scholarships if you were going to college and the college degree was related to the work you're doing. They would subsidize you, and that was kind of how it was back then. If you passed, if you flunked, they didn't pay. So there's a lot of incentive to do well and to work hard. That's all gone, of course. But this is across the Western world. This equity thing, where all standards of measurement, testing, examination, handing in assignments on time, is all to be done away with in the interests of, because black kids, minority kids and girls and so on, because they fail at a much higher rate on these exacting standards, I know what we'll do. Will we increase the quality of education or the intensity of education for these kids, give them remedial education? No, we'll just remove all standards of measurement. We'll remove all merit. Now, this is something that's, of course, an attitude that's crept into the employment thing. So, I see it, and my colleagues, we see it all the time now, the low quality people that are around and in employment, and wherever you see a minority person, with minuscule exception, wherever you see a minority person, you're dealing with someone who shouldn't be in that job. They haven't got it by merit. They're just an affirmative action quota hire. That's all there is, all they are, and they're nowhere near qualified, even minimally, for what would be necessary to do that job effectively. And so, talking to people in HR and even talking to CEOs and so on, white people, straight white males are subject to a far more rigorous, interviewing and selection process. And any little sort of blemish anywhere is seized upon as a reason not to hire them. Whereas a minority person can be hired, not only are they unqualified, and not only have they not met any independent standard, and not any bits of paper they've got are all affirmative action bits of paper as well, but also this idea of they get 1 half-hour interview and they've got the job, whereas the straight white guy can be subject to multiple interviews going for hours and psych tests and this and that. So there's a very heavy loading of quality. You have got to qualify to a very high standard, which is the same, in a court hearing. If you're a white guy, in legal contest with a minority person, the burden of proof the white guy has to meet is far higher than the burden of proof that the minority individual has to meet. So the burden of proof is being reversed fully there. So we're seeing this all across Western society now, unless you're part of the elite, and then you get a free pass. But if you're the hardworking, self-made, diligent, conscientious, upstanding citizen, straight white guy, you're fucked. Because in every direction you turn, the game is loaded against you by removing what would separate you from the others, and as this moves through as a way, and in the education system is getting worse. The various aspects of merit were being dropped. I worked quite some years ago. I worked for a company where they started to dabble in the woke side of things, and they wanted to promote a number of women into junior management positions, and so they and I was covering for someone who's away on vacation, so they slotted me into like an area of the human resources department, which was in charge of I think it was called like the trainee education program or something like that. And so I had to issue the tests and the exams, grade them, and then give them back to the trainees and so on. So it was quite like a little bureaucratic role, I guess. So I did that, and my determination to be completely impartial, having my own education system, my own education being, you passed or failed the exam. That was it. And if you failed the exam, then you just worked twice as hard. You studied harder and this sort of thing, and concentrated more. You did better. You improved your knowledge in the subject, so you would pass it next time. That was how you improved. And the fact you flunked the exam let you know, and let the teacher know how whether you were fully prepared or you hadn't studied hard. It didn't matter, but it showed, look, I've got to do more work if I want to pass. If I want to come first in the class, I've got to work a lot harder to do that. That type of thing. And that's the education system that I came through. So I, without even thinking, applied it. But I got a little speech from, I don't know who it was, one of the senior managers that said something along the lines of, "Now, Billy Bob, it's very important to the company that we start putting women into managerial positions. So I want you to keep that in mind when you grade the trainees' paper." Now, there were two things. They had an oral exam and a practical exam. And so the practical exam was like a written exam, and there was like an oral thing where you sort of go around with like a questionnaire effectively, and then you ask the trainee, okay, how would you do this? Then they show you how they would do it, and so I thought it was actually quite good. I whoever put it together, I thought I'd done quite a reasonable job, but of exam and hitting the right things to understand, had the person learned the work and would they be useful trainees, useful employees and productive employees, that type of thing. So so I got the so after that talk, I thought, okay, well, I'll take that on board, but I wasn't quite sure what he meant. But what he meant, that was code speak for, we want you to pass all the girls, all the women, all the young women. We want you to pass them all. Doesn't matter if they fail or not, or even if they fail to hand in their papers. Now, what happened with the written assignment was it had to be, for example, had to be handed in on a Friday, and all the boys, all the men, all the young men handed in their assignments on time. The work was done. It was thorough. It was complete. It was all of it. So I'm going from memory here because it's quite a few years ago. I don't think a single young woman handed their paper in. If it was one or two, and they were incomplete, and it was sloppy work. So no, a couple of them must have, because I remember handing the papers back to them and saying, look, this is you've done a crap job here. I'll give you the weekend to do a better job. So when they came in, I gave the papers. That's right. I gave the papers back and said, look, you've got the weekend. I'll let you hand it in on Monday. And I didn't want the boys to know, the young men to know about this, because it seemed like I was playing favourites. And why couldn't they get their papers back to do more work? Why did only the girls get the papers back so they could work on them some more over the weekend? That type of thing. So I didn't want that to get out, because it would have, I think, subtracted from the the rigor, if you like, of the whole exercise. I was only a young guy at the time. I wouldn't have been, wouldn't even have been 24, 23, 24 maybe. So then I gave the papers back to those few girls that did hand it in, and then they brought the papers back on Monday and had done nothing over the weekend. Why you had the weekend? Why didn't you? I was busy. I had to go out with the girls, and we had a party, and my best friend was had a party, and and this. So I got this sort of stuff coming back, and so anyway, the girls that didn't hand them in, I gave them till Monday night and said, look, you've got till today to do it. They'd mentioned something then to the young men. A couple of the young men came to me and complained, well, why are the girls getting a break? Why do they get a special thing? If they failed, they failed, and that's it. And which, again, was largely my attitude. But given the talk that the senior executive, I was cutting the young women some slack. But then they didn't hand the papers in, or maybe one of them did, and it was crap. So I failed all the girls because either they didn't hand the papers in, or the stuff they handed in was so bad that it was you couldn't pass it in a million years. And so then I had the guy who gave me the pep talk on we want the girls to, and his boss came in, and they were sort of red-faced and you could tell they were agitated and annoyed, and so they came in and they told me, look, you are going to pass all the girls. So I explained, well, look, they haven't even handed in their papers, and I mean, look, and I got one out, and look at this. I mean, this is rubbish work. You wouldn't pass. Don't care. Yeah. Billy Bob, did you realise your job's on the line here? You do what the fuck we tell you to do. You will pass all the girls, all the young women. You will pass all of them, and that's it. And if we get any more back chat from you, then you're going to be looking for another job. You get that, Billy Bob? And the vehemence and the intensity of it all, you're going to be out of a job if you don't do this. Oh, fuck, all right. So, but that's how it was. And this, again, was some years ago. But it shows the willingness, when you're seeking a particular outcome, the willingness to ditch all standards. Anything that may get in the way of the outcome will happily be jettisoned. And standards and merit are the first thing to go every time. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.